And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth, a great day when President Trump gave a great and direct answer to the Iranian proposal to end the war. He called that proposal garbage. And speaking of garbage and wasting time, President Trump experienced, according to several sources, one of the worst mental health episodes of his presidency after a multi-hour overnight blitz. We will get to that. There are also revelations about the military budget. The Pentagon today put the cost of the war on Iran at closer to $29 billion. That's $4 billion more than 2 weeks ago. And it's not because they've spent that $4 billion in the last 2 weeks. This came out during testimony by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. I'm sure he enjoys all of this testimony to Congress. He was at a pair of hearings on the Pentagon's $1.5 trillion budget request. But the new $29 billion figure as to the cost of the war offered by the department's comptroller does not include the cost of repairs to U.S. facilities damaged by Iranian attacks. And yes, there has been some damage. Speaking of damage, the FBI director, Kash Patel, has been joining Pete Hegseth with congressional testimony. He's scheduled to testify before senators this afternoon. And this is really like a Saturday Night Live parody, really. I mean, he would have Kash Patel and Pete Hegseth going out to testify together. They both have drinking problems, remember? and maybe they can go together and indulge in the personal brand of whiskey that Kash Patel has been reportedly giving to his friends. They had the cold open for Saturday Night Live over the weekend. Actually had Kash Patel, Pete Hegseth, and Justice Kavanaugh of the Supreme Court, though that's not fair, really, because the charges about him drinking are primarily from high school and college. But okay, not from when you're head of the FBI. In any event, the FBI director, Kash Patel, scheduled to testify before senators this afternoon about his agency's budget. Mr. Patel will appear alongside other top federal law enforcement officials, but he is likely to face the bulk of the questions from lawmakers about agent firings, politically sensitive investigations, like maybe that investigation about the seashells and James Comey. We'll see about that. And also the news reports, multiple reports, that he has disputed about his alcohol use on the job. The President of the United States, meanwhile, is traveling to Beijing today for a high-stakes summit with Chinese leader Xi Jinping, where the war in Iran is expected to be a major focus. And there's a piece in the Wall Street Journal, and we're going to be speaking to Gordon Chang about why it is that President Trump may be coming to this meeting with Xi Jinping holding some cards that he can deploy to help use China's influence to bring this war to an end. China has long been a close ally of Iran and is a main importer of Iranian oil. The trip comes as Trump said the ceasefire with Iran is on life support, and as aides say that he is more seriously weighing renewed combat operations. Speaking about those combat operations, We're going to be speaking later in the show to Mike Nelson, who is a retired Army Special Forces officer and a member of the Atlantic Council's counterterrorism project, talking about how did we go from demanding unconditional surrender of the Iranians to please help us make a deal. Just make a deal. The Iranians appeared not to be particularly anxious to make that deal. How did that happen? And what can the president do to improve matters? And the Wall Street Journal reported that the United Arab Emirates have been discreetly carrying out attacks against Iran, including an early April attack on a refinery on Iran's Lavan Island that sparked a major fire and knocked out much of its capacity offline. The strikes, which Abu Dhabi hasn't publicly acknowledged, have been the subject of speculation since the middle of March, when open-source researchers identified photos purporting to show French Mirage fighters and Chinese Wing-Lung drones, both operated by the UAE, in action over Iran. The disclosure casts the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, targeted by more than 2,800 Iranian missiles and drones during the war, as the first Arab Gulf state to act as a direct warring party against Tehran. Also, CNN is reporting that from groceries to gas to rent, rising prices are straining household budgets, and many people feel it's harder to get ahead or even just stay afloat. There's a new CNN poll that finds 76% of Americans, that's 3/4 of us, say higher prices are their biggest financial problem, although some are cautiously optimistic that relief may be on the horizon. And what about relief for President Trump? Mediaite is reporting President Trump got clobbered. That's their language. Again, there are people who will say you shouldn't even use the term clobbered because it implies a physical attack on the president. And this is not a physical attack. It's just a public opinion disaster. The President Trump got clobbered on the economy in a new CNN poll, that poll we just mentioned, with a whopping 77% blaming Trump policies for increasing the cost of living. Aside from the occasional outlier, like the 100% MAGA poll that Trump bragged long and hard about, saying that people who call themselves MAGA supporters still love Trump, Trump has been showered with an escalating series of bad polls for most of the second term. But things have gotten especially acute since the Iran war began, with soaring gas prices contributing to dissatisfaction with Trump over the economy. The very latest CNN SSRS poll illustrates the point in graphic terms. Right off the bat, the president reached a new two-term record for disapproval at 65%. But managed to avoid his lowest approval number by 1 point at 35%, beating the low mark he hit on January 9th, 2021. That was just 3 days after the January 6th attack on the Capitol building and the riot there. It's not a good moment for Trump's approval, but of course that could change very dramatically if the war comes to a successful end, which basically the whole world would benefit. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump spent hours last night into early Tuesday morning publishing dozens of social media posts attacking his perceived enemies, particularly Barack Obama. Coming up on The Medved Show. Mike Nelson is a retired Army Special Forces officer and a member of the Atlantic Council's Counterterrorism Project. He is formerly worked with the Institute for the Study of War and the National Security Institute. His column is a must-read. It's posted at our website at michaelmedved.com. It is called From Unconditional Surrender to Please Make a Deal. It's about the changing U.S. posture regarding Iran and the excursion there, the journey that we've taken to Iran. First of all, Mike Nelson, thanks for joining us. You don't have any problem referring to this as a war, do you?
I don't. I think it's pretty clearly a war. No matter what the president or anyone else wants to call it, we are using military force to try to exert our influence and achieve an end against an adversary. It's by any definition a war, no matter what others would prefer to call it.
Okay, so how did we get from initially demanding unconditional surrender to now basically just begging for some kind of a face-saving deal?
Well, I think, I'd be by no means the first one to identify the fact that the president has not been clear about the original inciting event for why we went to war with Iran and when we did and what we're trying to achieve in that war. This current round of our tensions with Iran seemed to start in January with the popular uprisings of the people of Iran who are opposed to their government, and the president making pretty broad pronouncements about help being on the way and warning Iran not to crack down on their people, which they did, basically flaunting their resistance in his face. And he made some broad promises about what the Iranian people should do and what the Americans would do in response, that we would protect them and that they should rise up. And they did, and tens of thousands of them were killed. We then have gone to talking about everything from the enduring 47-year conflict with Iran and how we need to put a final end to that, and how we're going to change the regime, how we're going to get a definitive answer to the Iranian nuclear program, how we're going to end Iranian support to their regional proxies, any number of things that we've proclaimed are the reasons for the war and what we're going to achieve through it. And the president, in his traditional bluster or his particular style, said that nothing would be acceptable short of unconditional surrender, that the Iranians would accede to everything we demanded. And we haven't seen that. The fact is, the pressure we've exerted on the Iranians, both military and economic, as of yet, have not been sufficient to bring about any kind of concessions. Their most recent response over the weekend was kind of in line with their previous multi-point program or proposals, that not only are not acceding to what we say we want from them, but also are demanding things of us, including reparations and de facto control over the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes, and they didn't have that control over the Strait of Hormuz before this war. So if President Trump wanted to find something that he could hold on to and say, this is the achievement of the war. We've all heard about how their Navy has been sunk and the Air Force has been grounded, and we've done a lot of damage on the ground, but they appear to be genuinely uninterested in making any face-saving concessions to the United States. What could the president do other than intensifying the military attack and even, as you write about, moving toward a ground invasion?
Well, when we talk about what we have accomplished, we should be clear-eyed about it. Now, there is such a thing as punitive action that we do to punish countries that are resistant to American interests, and we've done that in the past. Operation El Dorado Canyon against the Libyans was a limited strike because of Libyan support for terror. And that's what we did. We kind of struck them and then withdrew, and that was sufficient. That isn't what we communicated we were trying to do. So even if we claim that now, it would seem like kind of retroactive justification for what we've done. The Secretary of Defense and others have talked a lot about what we've achieved militarily, which is impressive, but it isn't quite as much of an achievement as they proclaim. We haven't completely destroyed the missile capabilities. There's been recent reporting, largely derived from Israeli intelligence, that the Iranians retain a much larger missile program than we thought with our initial damage. Now, we haven't traded them. We have disrupted them, and disruption can be a task that the military achieves, but it hasn't been as much of a coercive mechanism, as much of a pain point for the Iranians as the president seemed to believe that it would be, that just striking them would get them to cry uncle and give into what we wanted. So now the president kind of has three choices and three different levers, and all of them can be used in concert. One is basically accept defeat. Now, the president has his own rhetorical flourishes. No matter what happens, he'll obviously claim victory, even though the polling suggests the American people see that that's not the case. But, basically we walk away with just what we have achieved. Number two is to escalate the pressure and the coercive mechanisms economically, which would largely look like probably a long-term imposition of our mutual blockade, economic pain for the American people and economic pain for the Iranians. And then the third one is a military escalation. Most likely what I think would be plausible as an achievement would be some kind of tailoring of each. We escalate a little bit, but we also tailor in these maximalist claims that the president has made of what we're going to achieve. I'm guessing that he's going to focus largely on one thing, which is the Iranian nuclear program, getting some kind of concession towards that. It may look a lot like JCPOA or JCPOA 2.0, but he'll claim it was a great, victory and so much better than what Obama negotiated.
I noticed that there is no possibility now that people are talking about regime change, which was talked about the night that President Trump announced the war, and we assumed that the Iranian regime, the regime of the mullahs, was tottering and it was going to be going away and it was going to be changed. Doesn't that represent a huge mistake on the part of the United States to believe that the very intense bombing and successful bombing that we did would lead to the undoing of the entire regime?
Well, I think that, like great comedy, foreign policy also relies on timing a lot of times. We sat back and watched while the uprising took place in January and then was put down. We didn't respond until late February after the uprising was already complete. It's not to say that it would have been successful if we'd done that, but it was unlikely that it would have this kind of regime change effect in the aftermath. The fact is,
the question becomes, what do we do now and where do we go from here? And Mike Nelson has written about the major alternatives that the president is facing when come to a ground invasion. And when asked about the war or when explaining it to children, Trump's number one response always is, "Do you want a nuke to go off?" Is that going to somehow be a success if we avoid a nuke going off? We'll get to more with Mike Nelson coming up on The Medved Show.
The Michael Medved Show.
Listen.
Nationwide.
Listen.
And around the world at michaelmedved.com.
And listen.
And on the Michael Medved Show, we're speaking with another Mike Nelson, who is a retired Army Special Forces officer and a member of the Atlantic Council's Counterterrorism Project. He is formerly a staff member on the Institute for the Study of War and the National Security Institute, and he writes for the Dispatch, among other venues. His most recent columns are about, basically what's next with the war on Iran, and he does have no problem referring to a war rather than using euphemisms like a journey or an excursion or an adventure. It's a war. And there's a great deal invested politically and economically and in terms of national security for the U.S. to be perceived as having waged a successful war. What is the crucial element, Mike Nelson, that is available now? We are not looking at regime change. That's almost certainly not going to happen. What's the best that President Trump could achieve in bringing this war to an end?
Well, I think we're talking about just the nature of war. There are kind of two general bins that they fit into. There's total war, where you actually destroy the political entity that you're opposing. You know, fighting World War, or the Germans in World War II, we waged total war against the Third Reich and destroyed it. We destroyed their capacity to continue the war or exist as a political entity. Everything else besides that is a form of limited war, where you are trying to exert such pain and influence on your adversary that you get them to agree to some kind of conditions that you're trying to seek, some kind of coercive mechanism. So as we pursue this war, we seem to have backed off of some of the maximalist claims of the president in the past and some of his administration, talking about the 47-year-long conflict and that the hour of the Iranian people's liberation is at hand. We've walked away from that. So now the question is, how do you coerce the Iranians sufficiently to give up the thing that you are trying to get them to give up? And I think the president needs to be more specific about it. If that is the nuclear program, and specific to that, what within the nuclear program are we looking for them to do? There isn't a lot of physical infrastructure left besides the highly enriched uranium, and then there isn't a lot we can do to change their thinking, because in the past they've agreed to things and then continued to seek a nuclear weapon. So the president needs to be more specific, not only with us, the American people, but also with the Iranians as far as what he's trying to achieve.
One of the points of pressure that you write about in your piece, What a Ground Operation Might Look Like in Iran, is a seizure of Karg Island. What would that achieve, and is that doable without appalling cost for the U.S. military?
So I think it is achievable. This was something that I included in that column because there was a lot of reporting that the president was entertaining it at the time. He seemed to have liked it as a course of action. The question isn't whether we could achieve it. It's whether the cost would be sufficiently or worth it compared to what we would gain. Now, multiple people have pointed out, including two former commanders of mine when they spoke in the media, that we have the ability to hold Karg Island at risk from the air and sea. They really can't trade any of the oil that's transited through there, and seizing it would not bring extra economic pressure to them. It might be more of an embarrassment. It might be something that they would have to negotiate back, but it doesn't actually increase or ratchet up the economic pain that they're feeling along the way. It could be achieved with, it is within the realm of feasible. I don't know that it would come with, catastrophic cost, but it would come at a cost of American lives. And then once we have seized it, we then have, in theory, a Marine Expeditionary Unit or two sitting within indirect fire range from artillery, missiles, and rockets, as well as, maritime fires of the Iranians, basically held at risk without additional purpose. So it largely seemed to be something the president was entertaining. It was a shiny object that got his attention, but we seem lucky that he has moved past it and is no longer truly considered. That's what's being reported.
Well, right now, we have a situation where a great deal of emphasis when the president talks about this now is all on denying a nuclear weapon to Iran. And one of the questions that people ask, particularly people who have part of the ideological commitment to America first, is, okay, so what if they do have a nuclear weapon? They can't get that weapon to reach the American homeland or to threaten our territory. The argument would be, why should we intervene and make tremendous sacrifices economically and security-wise, and even in terms of human life, make those sacrifices to protect the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia or Bahrain or Israel? Shouldn't we just talk about whatever we need to do to keep America safe? What's the answer to that objection?
There are multiple objections to that stance. First of all, we need to prevent, and the president has articulated this, we need to prevent a world where Iran has a strategic deterrent against any future efforts against them. They are and have remained a malign actor throughout the region and the world. And with or without a nuclear weapon, they will continue to try to exert that malign influence. So if they have a nuclear weapon, they have the trump card that they cannot be touched or interfered with as they continue to pursue or export their malign influence. Second of all, they do have the ability to use that weapon or other weapons within the region and be a destabilizing force. We are a global superpower, not one that just exerts our power in our backyard. And number three, there is overwhelmingly the reciprocal effects that would take place throughout the region around the world if Iran gets a nuclear weapon. Other countries seeking their own protection, not only from Iran, or also seeing the benefit that Iran reaps from it, would pursue their own nuclear program. There would be an Emirati nuke. There would be a Saudi nuke. There would be, countless proliferation programs that take place throughout the country that make the world less stable rather than more. So preventing this from getting out of the box is definitely within America's interest, whether you're an American firster or one who looks at traditional American power around the world.
I appreciate that perspective very strongly. Right now, you've spent your lifetime serving our military and studying wars. President Trump very regularly claims that he has ended wars. How many wars do you believe the president actually can claim credit for terminating?
Well, I think some of them, obviously, he exerted some of his influence and diplomacy to help bring parties together in the past. But I do think one of the problems, the president takes his eye off the ball before the objective is complete. Venezuela, for example, which many people have reported was his model for thinking he could achieve easy effects in Iran, is not a complete issue. We removed Maduro, but the communist regime is still in power. And political reforms that are going to be required to empower the Venezuelan people and ensure stability in the region have not been accomplished. So one overnight objective to remove a high-value target is not a complete war, and it is not an ended war. By multiple reports, the president is looking for the exits in the Iran conflict and move on to the next thing, be that a domestic dispute or potentially another war with Cuba. But this not only isn't a complete issue, but also the way we end it, it's still going to leave lingering effects and competition with Iran. We have given to them proof of concept of a strategic deterrent in the Strait of Hormuz, and that's something we're going to have to contend with for the future.
We very much appreciate Mike Nelson, and his two columns, which we have been talking about, are both posted at our website at michaelmedved.com. They appeared originally in the Dispatch. And Mike, appreciate your service to our country and your service to keeping an informed public abreast of what is going on with this ongoing war. We will be right back on the Michael Medved Show. If you appreciate some of our on-air conversations, like the talks we just had with Nick Eberstadt of American Enterprise Institute, then you should hear them and see them as well. How? By checking out the Medved Official YouTube channel, featuring full interviews with guests like Brett Stevens, Tom Nichols, Nick Kristof, John Bolton, David Frum, John Yoo, and many more. Just search Medved Official on YouTube and hit subscribe and join us. Appreciate that attention. Meanwhile, there is news from CBS. President Trump says that he aims to suspend federal gas tax for a period of time. President Trump said in a phone interview with CBS News this morning that he aims to suspend the federal gas tax for a period of time. I think it's a great idea, the president said. Yup, we're going to take off the gas tax for a period of time, and when gas goes down, we'll let it phase back in. Gas prices have soared over 50% since the start of the Iran war on February 28th, hitting a high of over $4.52 on Sunday, that according to AAA. Analysts say the prices are likely to remain high, with Iran blocking the access to the Strait of Hormuz. But suspending the excise taxes, 18.4 cents per gallon on gas and 24.4 cents a gallon on diesel, requires an act of Congress. And passing it would cost the federal government about $500 million per week. So before this actually happens, it's unclear and confusing, because many of the gas taxes that we all pay are state gas taxes, which is one of the reasons that Washington, where I live, has some of the highest gas prices in the country. It's not because gas is so remote here. It's because the state taxes for gasoline are so high. Washington has had no state income tax, the only blue state that had that distinction. But now the Democrats who misrule in Olympia, Washington, the state capital, seem to have succeeded in creating a, quote, millionaires tax, which will basically violate the state constitution in applying an income tax, though they claim it's only for millionaires. California, they have only for billionaires, and they're chasing the billionaires away. Well, they can't come to Washington safely anymore. Meanwhile, consumer sentiment continued to decline this month, as reported on CNN, reaching a fresh record low as the war in Iran drags on, keeping energy prices elevated. The University of Michigan's latest consumer survey, released on Friday, showed sentiment fell early this month to a preliminary reading of 48.2. This is the lowest on record going back to 1952? To 1952? Are you kidding me? You have to go back to the middle of the Korean War to have this kind of consumer sentiment, as negative as it is now. But Kevin Hassett on CNBC still speaks on behalf of the White House. He's President Trump's chief economic advisor, and he speaks about the low consumer sentiment. This is clip 20.
I think that one of the things that's happening is that the world is changing so fast right now that President Trump has sort of taken every problem on earth and got 100% at fixing it. And I think that can be stressful for people to see so much change going on. But the bottom line is that in the end, when we look at what happens for elections, that people look at their wallets, they see how they're doing. The economy is growing very strong. Incomes are growing. And Ray Fair, you and I have talked about Ray Fair for 20 years. Ray Fair of Yale says that GDP in the second quarter is the thing that tells you what's going to happen in the election. And so I think that right now Republicans should feel very, very good about the trajectory of the economy.
Okay, President Trump is taking every problem on earth, and he's gone 100% at fixing it. Could that be a little bit of an exaggeration or an oversimplification? The president himself was in the Oval Office today and boasted about his own flexibility, which is particularly important in wartime. This is clip 7.
In the world, I built it largely in my first term, and I didn't know I'd be using it quite this much in my second term. But very simply, when they say, does he have a plan? Yeah, I have a plan. The plan is very simple. In war, you have to change. You have to be flexible. You have a lot of plans, but you have to do different plans in different days. But I have a great plan. But the plan is they cannot have a nuclear weapon. And they didn't say that in their letter.
Okay, the plan is they cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's not a plan. It's a negativity, is it not? Or would it be concepts of a plan? And the difficulty here is that obviously President Trump was not prepared in his plans before the war to the idea that they could very easily close the Strait of Hormuz. And this again will go down in history as a very significant historic mistake. In other words, not to include in your initial attack on Iran the expectation that they're going to respond, at least in part, by going after the world economy, not just the U.S. economy, by closing and mining and patrolling and controlling the Strait of Hormuz. The fact that they are now insisting on continued control of the Strait of Hormuz before they actually do a peace agreement, that failure of anticipation is deeply problematic. Meanwhile, there is an announcement from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, which may encourage a lot of Americans and may surprise a lot of supporters of Israel, an announcement by the Israeli Prime Minister. And Cory Booker, who is considered to be one of those Democrats who is thinking about or likely to pursue another campaign for the presidency, also has a number of things to say, some of them of some interest about the role of the United States in dealing with Iran. And Cory Booker wants to be a candidate, not a victim, but somebody who is claiming victim status right now may come as a surprise. It's ABC News, ABC Network. They say they have been a victim of a sustained, coordinated campaign of censorship and control by the Trump administration. Federal Communications Commissioner Anna Gomez told that to Josh D'Amaro, chief executive of Disney, the parent company of ABC. The parent company of ABC, the FCC under Republican Chairman Brendan Carr, has been weaponized to pressure a free and independent press and all media into submission. Gomez wrote in a letter sent to D'Amaro today and viewed by the Wall Street Journal. She is the lone Democratic commissioner on the FCC. Gomez has been an outspoken critic of many of Brendan Carr's actions, which she has alleged are aimed at pressuring broadcasters for political purposes. The letter to D'Amaro comes in the wake of several investigations into Disney and ABC initiated by Carr's FCC, including whether the talk show The View should continue to be granted certain exemptions as a news program. We'll see where that goes and more. Coming up with some shocking information about attitudes toward the April shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner in this greatest nation on God's green earth.
Here's a special discount, 50% off just for being a MedHead annual member. Join today at michaelmedved.com.